We
are
cultivate.
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 We are cultivate.
Hello and welcome to Ye Olde Crime, where we discuss the funny, strange, and obscure crimes of yesteryear. I'm your host, Lindsay Valenti, and joining me today is a very special guest, Katy Horan. Katy Horan is a Texas-based illustrator and fine artist. She received her BFA in illustration from the Rhode Island School of Design in 2003 and has since become known for work that is dark, beautiful, and almost always about women. Today, we'll be discussing Katy's work, Murder Ballads, Illustrated Lyrics, and Lore, which will be released by Andrews McMeel on April 29th, 2025. And in this unique illustrated collection, Literary Witches co-creator Katy Horan unearths the true and fictional stories behind 20 traditional murder ballads, exploring the beauty and horror of the art form through stories, lyrics, and original illustrations. Murder Ballads is a guide to the origins and cultural impact of murder ballads as a music genre, covering its roots in patriarchal violence and white supremacy, as well as its contemporary relationship to true crime. Mysterious and alluring as the songs themselves, Murder Ballads will delight history enthusiasts, armchair musicologists, true crime fans, and critics, as well as anyone who appreciates the darker side of folk music. Katy, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
So before we dive into the book, I feel like it would be remiss of me to not ask you about your artistic background and sort of what got you interested in art and the types of illustration work that you do.
I grew up as just like your average art kid, just like drew all the time. Everyone was always like, whenever there was a project, they were like, Katy, come draw the thing on the poster, you know?
Yep.
Like I got positive reinforcement from it. And my parents were cool. My parents were cool about it. And there's this very amazing like art school for children and teens in Houston, where I'm from, called the Glassell School. It's part of the Museum of Fine Arts Houston. And I got to take lots of classes there, like as a child, as a tween, as a teen. So I've always done it. Yeah.
That's awesome.
It is kind of like a coping mechanism for me. It always kind of has been through like some tumultuous times. So yeah, it has always been like the healthiest.
I mean,
thing.
We all have our coping mechanisms, and I can think of worse ones.
Than others.
Yeah,
right.
I can think of worse ones to have than drawing. We'll just say that.
Fair. I agree.
So you go into it in your book. Could you share with our listeners what first got you interested in murder ballads?
Well, it happened. It was kind of a random occurrence one evening in like, forget what year it was, in 2006, okay. In the aughts, okay? In the 2000s, I was living in New York City, and I was in my 20s, and I was trying to make art any way I could while working random jobs. And really kind of getting into folklore also at the time as like a huge wealth and source of inspiration for my work. And so one night my boyfriend, now husband, we went out to like some friend of his had a bluegrass band that was playing on the Lower East Side. And we went, and I wasn't really paying much attention, but they did play this song, and I caught like the story of it was that there was two sisters. And they both like love the same guy, but he chose one of them. So the jealous sister, threw her in the river, as one does.
Yep.
And drowned her sister, who then floats down to a pond where a fiddler comes along and makes a damn fiddle out of her bones and hair. And then when it played the fiddle, it like told the tale of her murder. And for like wherever I was in my life and my connection to folklore and my work, that just was like one of the coolest things I'd ever heard.
Yeah.
As a person who loves macabre and strange and folky, I was like, what is that? I was like, that's imagery that I want to draw. I was very influenced. So it took me a while to, over the course of like several years, I started kind of figuring out what they were. And then in like, let's say 2011 was when I was like, you know what? But I really was into them. I was doing like a lot of research and like discovering all the variants. And I was like, this would be a really, really cool book. And so I did some kind of like initial research for it then. And then I didn't have the type of context to make it into a book until much more recently.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was kind of the intro to them.
So kind of as you sort of started down the rabbit hole to learn more about this like subgenre of music, where did you even start? Like how did you even like go about starting the process?
Well, the hardest part was figuring out what that song was that I had heard with the bone, hair, fiddle, and the sisters. And I would like go into Google and be like, bone, fiddle, hair, sister murder, song. And it like, because that's all I had to go on. And I wasn't like, and like, I don't think that, like, I don't know why I didn't even ask the people. I mean, I guess my husband knew the people in the band. I could have just asked them, but I didn't. I realize that now. So once I found out that it is a song known commonly as the Wind in the Rain or the Dreadful Wind in the Rain, but comes from a much older song called the Twa Sisters. And then that's when I came across like something that, probably like a Wikipedia thing. It was like Twa Sisters is a traditional murder ballad, and I went, what? A what now?
Yeah,
because those two words together compared with what I was like, wait a second, this is way too my wheelhouse.
Yeah,
like this is way too specific to like everything that I'm interested in, and as then just an artist, not a writer.
Yeah.
Like the writer thing was not in my vision really in the beginning.
I love when worlds like that kind of collide where you're like, wait, this is a thing? Like this isn't just a one-off thing that like I just had stumbled upon.
Right.
This is a greater thing that lots of people know
about.
And
yeah, so it was like I would, I'd read like message boards and stuff, and I got to know, as making the book, I got to find and kind of like correspond with the other people who know about murder ballads, which is cool. Yeah. But it's still funny because when I tell people I made a book and they're like, what is it? I'm like, it's about murder ballads. They're like, A lot of people still don't know.
What?
Even though they've heard the songs, most likely they've heard murder ballads. They don't know that it's this whole thing.
Yeah, that's what it is. And you mentioned broadsides as source material in a number of the ballads you touch on in your book. So in your opinion, why do you think these types of songs were so popular among the general public at the time?
Well, in the broadside times, in my research I discovered that it was often used to report the news, and they were often sold at like executions.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then so a broadside would be printed with the story of what had happened, and I don't care what time and place it is, like sensationalism works.
It does, yeah.
Pulling emotions works, doesn't matter what, if it's like a printed broadside or like, scary news networks. So they would be kind of like just news or true crime for the people. And then traveling musicians, like bards and like traveling musicians in Europe, would write melodies to go along with them, with sort of like the text of it, or just melodies about what happened, songs about what happened, and they'd go kind of spread it through the countryside where people couldn't read. So that I find really interesting, is just like it functioned as sort of like just early information, but also entertainment.
Yeah.
Like true crime.
Well, and I think as you're saying that, like, I don't know why this didn't connect with me much sooner than this moment in time, but that's sometimes how things work. Probably one of the most common murder ballads that most people have heard of, if they're have any interest in like the true crime community is Lizzie Borden Took an Axe.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like that's a murder ballad.
Absolutely. It is. It is. And honestly, that would probably be my original murder ballad or like murder nursery rhyme kind
Yeah,
of thing that I'd ever heard. Yeah.
it's a lot more accessible than probably most people would realize until they
Yes,
start like
absolutely.
diving into it, because as you went into in the book, like there are lots of current or very
Hmm.
recent artists have covered several murder
Yeah.
ballads or ones that started out as murder ballads. So it's not like
Yeah.
it's this genre that died, for lack of a better word.
Not at
It's
all.
still
Not at
very,
all.
very much here.
It's kept alive and it's loved
Hmm.
in the world of musicians, country musicians, folk musicians. I mean, when I went through and learned all like who all had done renditions of a lot of these, like it was all like Bob Dylan, the Grateful Dead, like it's really like kind of just rock music to folk music. It's really
Hmm.
permeated
Hmm.
throughout.
And how difficult was it to track down a particular ballad to its source? Like, can you describe for
Oh,
us a little bit what that process was like as you like hide behind your book?
like I relive. You're making me. You're gonna make me relive trauma.
I was going to
What
say
you're gonna
sorry.
do?
I can tell I'm triggering you right now. I'm
Woo!
sorry.
No, it was crazy. It was so. It was a problem that I did not expect. I just never imagined having to come up against a problem like that. Well, first of all, I had to figure out which versions of which ballads I could actually print in the book. So I had to
Sure.
wait for like I spent like 2 weeks in this insane world of very gray copyright laws and public
Sure.
domain and who's this and if it's
Sure.
oral tradition it can still be copyrighted and like I was emailing with like librarians in England who were helping me like find like original sources and stuff and I there was a couple librarians out there who really were amazing and helped me so finding ones that were even public domain was really really challenging
Hmm.
and then the other ones it was just like a can of worms at all times a can of worms because it's really infinite iterations because
Hmm.
we only know what's been recorded we don't know what's
Sure.
sung in like the hollers that's been
Hmm.
passed down from generations right so it was a really wild beast to try and tame but I don't think you
Hmm.
can.
Yeah. I mean, you did a fantastic job. I mean,
Thank
but yeah,
you.
there were some that you went over where I was just like following the thread of like the twists and turns of like where it started and kind of where it ended up, and I was like, oh my god,
Yeah.
like how did you
It
research
was like
all
a
this?
puzzle. It was crazy because I didn't have a lot of time. And it's not like I've been doing years of research on murder ballads. I've done like
Hmm.
just research as an artist. I've just looked at them. I've read about them, nothing crazy. So not like an expert at all. So I had to basically do the research as I was writing my first draft, which kind of
Sure.
worked. Which kind of worked in a really interesting way, in that it made me very focused on specific things to find within the research
Sure.
and pull out. So it felt very mathematical and very like get like you said connecting dots and creating threads and sort of moving everything out of the way so I can see like the shape of the timeline
Sure.
and my brain liked that so that was like
Yeah.
like scratch something in my
Yep.
brain to kind of try and trace things that way
Hmm.
so that was actually a kind of a fun part of the research.
You have a very definitive illustrative style, which I love.
Mm,
So when
thanks.
it came to illustrating the ballads themselves, like what motifs really helped you decide
Oh,
how to convey your take on the songs and stories themselves?
that's such a good question. Thank you for asking it. Well, one thing I knew is I wanted to separate the illustrations of real people
Hmm.
that, the songs that are based on real murders. I wanted them to be separate from the fictitious ones. So
Sure.
the fictitious ones, I got like a little crazier, a little
Mhm.
weirder, darker, bloodier.
Sure.
But with all the ones that are real people, I did them all in this sort of like, in a sense, I was seeing them as memorials. So oftentimes
Sure.
it's just like the bust of the person or a likeness of the person, or just like sort of my interpretation, because there's no pictures of some of these
Yeah.
people. So
Yeah.
my interpretation, just sort of like their bust, like, shoulders and head, and then some type of floral situation that like
Mhm.
surrounds them. And that was great for me because it kind of like helped me break up the sort of like, so it was like a nice balance between true stories and
Yes. Some of your more like folklore ones versus more
oh yeah,
true to life
yeah,
ones. Yeah.
because I wanted to be like respectful of the dead folks,
Yeah.
and like some they have their faces aren't as weird as some of the faces in the other illustrations,
Mhm.
yeah. So that was conceptually that was one of my main things I was sort of following.
Yeah, and now that you say that, I can see that. It's almost like
Mhm.
a not really a cameo, but it is.
It's
It's
like
like
that,
it's kind of
yeah.
like a framed
Mm-hmm.
portrait in a sense. Yeah,
Exactly.
I like it.
Exactly. Thanks.
I'm sure over the course of your research, you uncovered a number of ballads, both across the pond and those that sprang out of Appalachia and within the African American community. How did you narrow down what ballads in particular you wanted to include in the collection?
There were several factors that determined that. One was, did I want to illustrate this ballad?
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
That because my first thing with this book was like I just want to make illustrations of these ballads.
Hmm.
So ones that I was drawn to, like imagery wise, but then I also wanted to be diverse, as
Hmm.
diverse as I could, So I, absolutely had to like include some Black American ballads, and I found one queer ballad,
Yes.
and which was an amazing find. So
Hmm.
it was like diversity. I wanted like a good mix of weird fictitious ones and true ones. They also had to be ones that I could find research on.
Sure. Yeah.
Because I ran into trouble with one of them, but I was so obsessed with the imagery of it but I couldn't find much research on it. So it's just like a shorter chapter.
Yeah.
It's just a little shorter
Yeah.
because like I couldn't find that much. Yeah, so it was, and there are some. The other thing that was really tricky is that some ballads will be known by multiple names and will sometimes
Sure.
like morph from one ballad, just like folklore, right? So
Yeah.
morph from like one ballad to the other. So there are a number of American murder ballads that have versions in the UK and Ireland and everything, but that are very, very, very similar to each other. They're like almost carbon copies of like, and I wanted to include some of them because it's one of the biggest sort of things that I felt I needed to talk about with these was just how like commonplace the violence against women in it are, and how that relates to violence against women now, and the fact that there's this entire trope, the murdered sweetheart.
Yep.
Who she's always pregnant, out of wedlock. The guy comes and he's like, "Hey, I love you. Let's go away on my horse and I don't know, get married or whatever." They say different things, and his name's always Willie for some reason. In America, it's always Willie.
Yeah.
And so she gets on the horse and he takes her to a lonely spot and he bludgeons her or he stabs her or he throws her. A lot of them get thrown in rivers.
Mm-hmm.
So many. And then he sometimes, has remorse when he's facing the gallows. Sometimes doesn't. But it's the same exact story, but it's so spread throughout everything.
Mm-hmm.
So it was tricky to figure out which versions of those to include and which ones to leave out. Because there's a song called The Banks of the Ohio, which is a very well-known one amongst people who know it. But I had to leave it out because I was like, I already got like 3 or 4 with this same like plot.
Yep.
Same shit, different day.
Yep, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And it's actually really funny that you mentioned that, because one of my questions was, why do you think the pregnant woman murdered and murdered sweetheart ballads were so popular and prolific? I mean, they're everywhere.
I know, right? I think that, well, they functioned in a couple different ways that I find very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I think, first of all, that shit's just common.
Yeah,
right?
Unfortunately, yeah.
It's common today. The number one leading cause of death for pregnant women is homicide.
Yeah.
And so you can't imagine that being much better back in the back centuries, right? So it's a commonplace thing that, of course, people forever don't take seriously, because people don't really take violence against women seriously.
Yeah.
And sorry to get heavy.
You're preaching to the choir, lady.
But it's called murder ballad, right? Right.
Yeah.
Well, so the other function that's really fascinating about them is that they served as cautionary tales and warnings to women.
Yes.
Because these songs are, sung in familial settings, community gatherings, it's part of the folk culture. So, there's a number of them that are true stories.
Mm-hmm.
Omi Wise for one, Pro Brian for another, that use the song to warn young women that listen up, men are dangerous and violent, so you got to make sure that you don't get murdered by them. It's very just men are evil and bad, but sorry, but we're not going to change that, so y'all need to don't be stupid but also be innocent. Because the murder's sweetheart is much like she's the image of Ophelia. Yeah. From the painting. And she is presented as this peaceful, angelic, naive, innocent being. Mm-hmm. Because, man, people love that. People love a beautiful dead white lady. Yep. I mean, and that's also I talk in the book about the Dead Girl show that also ties into true crime. Mm-hmm. But I think that it societally, and if we're looking at this through a lens of how did this serve the patriarchy, they definitely were meant as warnings for women to not transgress, and a reminder that a woman without agency or a dead woman is the most beautiful form a woman can be. It says a lot, I think. Yeah.
I would agree with that.
Getting a little riled. I know I was going to start riling myself up a little bit.
You're going to get all heated at the end of this interview.
I'm going to do my breathing.
No, I don't want to spoil the book for everyone, but I did want to discuss just a couple of the ballads in particular, if that's cool.
Mm-hmm. Yes, definitely.
Now, would you mind talking a little bit about the ballad Delia's Gone and the real story of Delia Green?
Oh, I would love to talk about Delia Green. All right, so Delia Green was a 14-year-old Black girl in Savannah, Georgia, in the late 19th century. She worked as a housekeeper in the home of a more well-to-do Black family, and was dating or seeing a young man named Moses Houston, who's also 14. And so what happened the night of her murder is that she was, they're having a big Christmas party. It was Christmas Eve, I believe. And they were having a big party. And Delia was there, maybe working, maybe just having fun. And Moses was there as well. And their children, they're 14 years old. So Moses said something no one really knows for sure about, basically he was bragging that he had sex with her, that he had slept with her. Mm-hmm. And she heard that and got mad. And she called him a son of a bitch, which he didn't like. Now, previously in the night, it is known that Moses had gone to the gun repair shop to get the house owner's gun back from the shop. And so he had it on his person. He had not given it back to him. And so when she called him a son of a bitch, he shot her. and she died. And of course she died like later because there wasn't like a hospital that she could have been taken to.
Yeah.
In this time and place as a Black person. And so she died. She was a 14-year-old girl that died. So that's the story. Was murdered. And that's the story. And he pled not guilty, but there's a lot of conflicting testimonies that really kind of didn't help him out. And he ended up, I believe, since he was so young, the jury declared that he was guilty, but they recommended mercy for his sentencing.
Yes.
Yeah, and so he was sentenced not to death, but to life in prison, in which he served 12 and a half years. He was paroled in 1913, and then his history, no one wasn't able to trace it past that.
Gotcha.
So I was going to do Delia's Gone. I always knew I was going to do Delia's Gone just because I knew the Johnny Cash version.
Yes.
But I hadn't listened to it in a long time. I was just like, oh, Johnny Cash did that. Like, I'll put that in my list of ones to research.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went to go research it, and I started reading Johnny Cash's lyrics. And they were... Now listen, don't get mad, people. Calm down, everybody. Johnny Cash fans are going to need to take a breath.
Yep.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Because I might say some things they don't like.
Yep.
But after reading so many ballads about white women, talking about them being beautiful floating swans on the river, and their fair hands, lily white hands.
Yeah.
And I read Johnny Cash talking about a 14-year-old girl, calling her low down and trifling, calling her so mean it makes me want to grab my submachine. So I got really mad.
Yeah.
I got really mad alone in my studio when I was reading this, and I got really mad at Johnny. But that wasn't that was his version. He added some stuff, but that's a long line of a murder ballad tradition that treated this 14-year-old Black girl as basically portrayed as like an adult gambler woman, about town. Like they couldn't even leave her girlhood intact. After she died, they took that. They made her an adult, and they made her like low down and trifling, according to Johnny, and that made me mad. So I write a lot about that in that chapter.
And it's like they essentially paint her as this woman that deserved to get shot, and it's like, no, that is not what happened at all. No.
It was just like a stupid kid did a stupid thing,
Yep.
And that's the story of her.
I got mad as well, so justified.
Good. Yeah. So sorry, but Johnny Cash is not, I don't appreciate him for that particular thing. It was I really felt honored happy that I could do a illustration of her. I didn't know what she looked like, but I looked at some beautiful like old cabinet cards of younger Black women from like the turn of the century, and I sort of invented a Delia, and I got to like surround her with flowers and stuff, and that felt like I felt obligated or obliged to do that, and I was happy I got to. Not obligated,
for sure,
but moved to do that.
It was a good way to honor her memory. And like actually tell her story, as opposed to the bastardized version that was told of her. So
exactly.
And that's kind of a great segue, because I'm not sure how common incest was in ballads, but
oh, that is interesting. But continue.
But what interested you in the tale of Lizzie Wan, and why was it, or Wayne, and why was it important that you shared it?
Why did I like with Lizzie Wan? I like that one because that was just straight up like
Bizarro
Land.
I
know something just kind of like it's just kind of a fucked up one, and I wanted a few of the kind of pretty fucked up ones. So that one just always kind of like stuck with me as being, and it was a little bit different. I thought the incest thing, that is present in some not American ballads though. That did not make it across the Atlantic. That stayed over in Europe.
It's like that's a weird taboo that Americans are like, you know what, that's pushing it a little too far.
Yeah, Americans don't mess with that. They get very freaks us out. It freaks us out. So I mean, rightly so, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's not great.
I'm uncomfortable right now even talking about it. Kill me.
Yeah, but yay, incest.
No, I hope.
And if you are, that's not okay.
Yeah. So it was that angle of it was just I was like, I just needed a few like disturbing ones in there. I think it was also I wanted because sibling murder is common also, and I wanted like another sibling murder aside from that wasn't sister, so
sure,
brother sister.
Sure.
Yeah.
You mentioned her earlier, but could you tell us more about Pearl Bryant and kind of the real case behind the ballad?
Yeah, I was just reading that one actually. So what's fun about Pearl Bryant to me is that my husband is from Cincinnati, Ohio.
Okay.
And this murder happened right across the river from Cincinnati in Fort Thomas, Kentucky, where I have been before. So I thought it was kind of cool that it was familiar territory. So this was in the winter, the beginning of 1896, and in Fort Thomas, Kentucky, a farm worker came across the body of a woman near sort of the edge of the property, and her dress was like flung up over her head, so he just saw like her legs and everything. And then when he went closer and removed the dress, he found out her head was missing.
Yeah.
So this is a particularly specific type of grisly detail. Like they're not always this specific.
Yeah.
But this is a true story. So oftentimes like that kind of type of detail isn't like, I don't know, not that much like beheading going on.
Sure, yeah.
So what had happened, it was a young woman named Pearl Bryant. She got pregnant by one of two men. The history and research kind of goes back and forth on that. And he set her up with some friends of his who were dental students.
Yes.
Who had medical knowledge and I guess either had performed abortions or just said, hey, we'll perform an abortion. So she was actually in Indiana. So Pearl was in Indiana and she went to Cincinnati to get this abortion. She was shown to have died by an injection of prussic acid, which I hate to say that I forgot what that was. Although
it's not great.
It's not great. What they told the police was that she OD'd on, they gave her too much cocaine for her procedure because it was 1890s. So but it turns out it was the prussic acid, which whether or not that was part of like how they were going to do this procedure, we don't know.
Yeah.
So she died before an abortion could be performed. She died. They made the quick choice to cut her head off to avoid identification. By the way, head never found.
Which is horrifying.
To this day, Pearl Bryant's head is not found. Yeah. And they dumped her body. They totally got caught. They were prosecuted. They were hanged. Yeah. Like together, so they were totally caught. But the thing that was really interesting about what happened with her, and this was a really interesting one to research because I found some great writings and great works about how the newspaper at the time really fucked around with her image to generate emotional responses and sell papers, etc.
Sure.
So before they found out she was pregnant, when it was just like a random headless woman, because she was about 5 months pregnant, so it may not have been as obvious. Found out upon autopsy, but they did not release that information right away.
Mm-hmm.
So at first the papers were like, who is this woman about town, like named like headless lady who they kind of painted her as this like sort of trashy lady. And then they found out she was pregnant, and all of a sudden it became an opportunity for basically a murdered sweetheart ballad, even though it was real life, but that is just such a common narrative that was just very popular amongst people in their news and their ballads. So they started to paint her then as this like lost, innocent, so naive, whatever. But yeah, no, it's not. And also, it doesn't always mention her abortion. I don't believe in all of the variants. Like the variants for her can be very wide ranging and like really just like trite and not even related to the actual story.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of them also act like cautionary tales.
Yeah.
As well. Like there's one that begins with I wish I had the whole thing right now, I'd read it, but it begins with take heed, and then it says something about men being like they're unjust and untrustworthy, and then he says, but don't let this be your lot. Like don't let this happen to you.
And it's like
but the men are going to continue to just be bad. Sorry.
Yeah.
So that's just an example of that awesome concept.
No one's going to set out to be like, you know what sounds fun? Getting pregnant and then being murdered. I'm not tied to my head.
Yeah, I don't need it. Yeah.
Is that great. The one where they were able to determine who she was based off her shoe size?
Yeah. Yes. That was the one. Okay, yeah, because she had, I think, very small feet.
Very small feet.
So they were they found like the shoemaker.
Yes.
This kind of thing was easy back in the day because it was like, they just went to the guy that made those shoes.
Yeah.
Or sold those shoes.
Yeah.
And he was like, oh yeah, I sell, like 3 women have bought those shoes in this size and the other 2 were alive with their heads on. So it was pretty...
Process of elimination.
It was some pretty solid detective work. It was some pretty solid detective work then.
Because I needed to look it up. Prussic acid.
Oh, yeah.
It interferes with your oxygen, so you essentially like asphyxiate to death when you're...
Fantastic.
Yeah, so it prevents oxygen from getting to your cells and like getting to where it needs to go. So
I need to know if that was some like crazy thing that they actually used. Like these were dental students. Was that used in 19th century dentistry? Kind of thinking it must have.
Yeah, because they used it a lot.
We're solving crimes right now.
Yeah, but then they also used it a lot in veterinary work.
Oh, interesting.
I wonder if that's what they use to put animals down. You know what I mean? And that's kind of why it was so easy to access. I mean, dental kids, I don't know if I call them kids. Dentists were able to kind of get access to a little bit of everything back then. So it doesn't really surprise me that they were able to get their hands on it because...
Yeah, absolutely. It seemed pretty free and loose back then.
Yeah.
Like, you need some ether, some laudanum. Here you go.
Yeah. We have plenty of cocaine.
Arsenic.
So.
Arsenic?
Yeah.
Arsenic biscuits? Yes, cocaine for everything.
Yeah.
Cocaine for days.
You got a slight tickle the back of your throat? Cocaine. That'll fix it right up.
Maybe. You know what? I wouldn't have minded, to be honest with you.
You do.
The doctor said,
I need this cocaine. So can you share with our listeners what makes the ballad Alice Mitchell and Freddie Ward so different from the typical murdered woman subgenre?
It is the only same-sex murder ballad that I was able to come across in all the scouring of the internet and internet archive books. Because I really wanted to know. You know, I was looking for different types of stories.
Mm-hmm.
And it's well documented. So it's Alice Mitchell and Freddie Ward were 2 young women in Memphis back in the late 19th century, 1890s, who no one. Some people say they met at like a finishing school, like a girls' school.
Sure.
But they were sort of in the same part of Memphis.
Gotcha.
And they fell in love, and Alice like fell hard.
Yeah.
And Alice also was, kind of known to have some mental health struggles. Okay.
Gotcha.
So she fell in love with her hardcore. And Frida loved her back. And she went by the name Freddie. So they had like a whole thing where like affair through letters, where they wrote letters, and then Alice went with Frida to stay at her sister's home that was outside of Memphis. They had like their full love affair. They wanted to run off and get married. Alice was working on trying to pass as a man, and they would get married. And there are letters of this. And they had a whole elopement plan. But then Frida's sister found a letter and shut that shit down fast. Like so basically Frida was under lock, and Alice began going mad trying to get in touch with her. Frida wasn't, she, for whatever reason, however, was fully intimidated into staying away from Alice by her family. And it just drove Alice mad. She went mad. There was possible suicide attempts in that time. She was volatile. She was obsessed with Frida because, months passed of her trying to get in touch and she couldn't. And then she finds out that Frida has come back to Memphis and is staying with like a mutual friend. And she sends message to Frida at this house, and the letter comes back. So she gets her father's straight razor. And this is random. She took her family's buggy, and for some reason she like picked up a friend and her like little nephew. I don't know why, but they rode through Memphis, and they found Frida. And Alice just like jumped out of the buggy and attacked her, like cut her. Frida ran, and they, tussled, and then Alice cut her throat. And she was committed to the Western State Hospital for the Insane in Bolivar, Tennessee. And she is believed to have died in there of tuberculosis. So it's a sad story.
It's really sad.
And what's amazing about it is that it's one where the killer is not like this emotionless psychopath named Willie.
Exactly.
Who's just like, I killed the woman I loved for absolutely no reason.
Yep.
Like this story, like they're like, you really get a sense of, and the research is done on them really reveals like the humans there. And it's pretty tragic and just sad. Yeah. But what's also weird about it is that like in the reporting of it, people couldn't handle the idea that two women were in love, and they had to, like, all the rumors and newspapers and everything just had to come up with a story about there being a man that came between them. Because
that was like the only way that it was palatable.
Tracks. Because people didn't even know that was a thing that existed. They would have been like, what? Like they had no idea. I mean, maybe they did, but it was just such a like bizarre concept that some people like just couldn't wrap their brains around it. So
it was like another one of those taboo things, like that doesn't happen. And if you hear about it happening, it's like that person's obviously insane, because there's no other reason for them to be behaving this way or to live that sort of lifestyle or whatever. So
right, exactly.
Why do you think it's important to preserve the history of songs like the ones you've included in your collection?
I think it's, first of all, there's two parts for me, I think.
Sure.
I think that anything that exists of oral tradition or that comes out of a folk tradition deserves to be preserved if possible.
Mm-hmm.
I believe it connects us to something, it connects us to people way back in the past.
Yes.
Because folk culture is so like sort of essential
Mm-hmm.
and rooted deeply into all of our cultures in
Mm-hmm.
some way, shape, or form. So in that sense, I think just preserving the oral tradition and is important. I also think that it's just another sort of like lens through which we can look at major issues we have today. It's sort of like, you know, I started becoming interested in them because I thought the imagery was amazing, and it was just this. They were these beautiful, sorrowful, dark, dark songs that really just resonate with me artistically
Mm-hmm.
or inspirational. And then I started researching them, and I was like, oh, this is like a whole like this. Looking at them through this and learning about and looking at it through the lens of violence and patriarchal violence
Mm-hmm.
and white supremacy. It was just I felt almost grateful to have found like another subject through which to kind of like process how that manifests today by looking kind of how it manifested in the past, because it's so similar. It's not that different, and that's what's so kind of crazy about it.
Yeah, I've discovered in my research for this show that a lot of things that happened in history unfortunately have a way of repeating themselves, good or bad. So like the stories that these ballads are based off of are still extremely common today, especially the murdered pregnant woman.
Exactly.
Like you said. But to your point, I do think it's important to preserve these oral tales because so much as things are changing in today's landscape, it's so easy to get lost. And that's something that it's important to have it preserved.
Yeah. I think that folklore, folkways, oral tradition, all of that is just it's just a beautiful through line to keep to not like necessarily like history, but like the people of the past.
Mm-hmm.
Because think about superstitions, right? Like I meant like a black cat better not cross my path. You know what I'm saying? Like I will like walk around that ladder. So and these are same things that people thought like a long time ago. So I feel like there's something kind of like just like basically human about it.
Mm-hmm. So I suppose my last question is there anything else we didn't discuss that you'd like to share with our listeners?
No, I think we were pretty thorough. What if my answer is just no? I think we did good.
No, that's fine. Yeah. That's awesome. That means I did my job.
You did a great job. Yeah. It's good because we got to talk about like Delia. We got to talk about.
Well, I would like to thank Katy for taking the time to join me today. Again, the book is Murder Ballads, Illustrated Lyrics and Lore by Katy Horan, which is currently available for pre-order and will be available everywhere on April 29th. We will have a link in the show notes so you can purchase a copy of your own to enjoy. And on that note, as always, I'm Lindsay, and we'll see you next time with another tale as old as crime.